If you uncover something strange buried in your backyard and can't explain it, your best bet is to call an archaeologist. If they're stumped, they'll turn to a scientist. But if the scientist is just as puzzled, then we've got a real mystery on our hands. Archaeologists are no strangers to baffling discoveries. They encounter them more often than you might think. While scientists can sometimes offer answers, they don't always have all the pieces to the puzzle, as you're about to find out. Ice is nature's great preservative. We all know that if a human or animal becomes entombed in ice, their remains will be better preserved for a longer time than the remains of someone buried in earth or mud. We didn't know it could work quite this well, though. When fossil hunters found this horned lark in the permafrost of northeast Siberia in 2020, they assumed it had become trapped there a few weeks or possibly a few months ago. They sent it for testing just to be sure, and were astonished to hear that this bird carcass is actually more than 46,000 years old. Now known as the ice bird, it's believed to be the first example of a bird of that era being found in the Belaugora area. The species is an ancestor of the modern species of horned lark, although there are a few obvious visual differences. The fact that it froze in one piece, rather than decomposing and falling apart before it froze, tells scientists that the ice must have encased it almost immediately after death, and from that, they're now reassessing their theories of how the Earth's permafrost layer originally formed. During 2014, the terrorist group known as ISIS destroyed many cultural treasures in Iraq and Syria for religious reasons, which is a tragedy in terms of lost history. In the process of doing that, though, they accidentally revealed some buried treasures that experts are only now getting the chance to study. One of those treasures is a buried palace in Mosul that is thought to be 2,600 years old. The palace was underneath a mosque that used to stand on a hill overlooking the prophet Jonah's grave. An inscription on one of the palace walls mentioned Esarhaddon, an Assyrian king, which would date the palace to around 680 BCE. Tunnels have been dug into the palace, and so it appears that the terrorists realized the significance of what they found and went looking for archaeological goods to sell on the black market. The site has been back under the control of Iraqi security forces since 2017 and has now been opened up to researchers. The more mysterious sights to be seen include reliefs of winged bull Assyrian gatekeepers, some of which are 20 feet high. Here's a question that very rarely gets asked. When did human beings start wearing trousers? We know that our ancient ancestors preferred to dress in gowns, capes, tunics, tights, and togas. So, when did trousers become the order of the day? Apparently, the answer to that question is earlier than we imagined. It happened about 3,000 years ago in China. These ragged-looking trousers were found in tombs in western China in 2016 and look remarkably similar to the garments we wear today. The legs are cut to a straight fit, and the reinforced crotch area suggests that they were designed to be worn by people who rode horses. From that, we might even surmise that the whole reason trousers were invented was to provide protection to the more delicate parts of the human anatomy while on horseback. If we accept that as the case, we have to query why it took so long for the idea of wearing trousers to reach Europe from China and become popular. The Europeans were also keen horse riders, so why weren't they wearing trousers? Purses, wallets, and handbags sit somewhere between practicality and fashion when it comes to accessories. We need purses because we need to put our valuables somewhere. But as we need to have them, we sometimes make them decorative items to go with our outfits. You'd probably guess that people have been using purses as fashion items for 200 years or more. But would you be surprised if we told you that the habit went back more than 3,000 years? We have proof of that. Here's a purse that was recovered from an archaeological dig site in Leipzig, Germany, in 2012. It's almost fossilized, but experts are sure that this is the flap of an ancient handbag. It's decorated with more than 100 canine teeth, which probably meant it wasn't all that comfortable to wear. Having said that, since when was fashion about practicality? The grave that the item was recovered from has been estimated as somewhere between 3,200 and 3,500 years old. So perhaps accessories made from dogs' teeth were all the rage back then. They say that the quality of wine improves with age. So perhaps we could interest you in the oldest unopened bottle of wine in the world. It's known as the Speyer wine bottle after the German town it was found in, and it's been sealed for around 1,600 years. The wax seal is air and watertight, and so the liquid inside it is, in theory at least, unspoiled. Despite that fact, scientists and experts have managed to resist the urge to open it ever since it was discovered in 1867 inside an ancient Roman tomb. The tomb belonged to a former Roman legionary, and so the wine was likely a gift to accompany him on his journey to the gods. 6 bottles were found in total, but only this one still contains its original filling. That alone is remarkable. The bottle is made of glass, and Roman glass is notoriously fragile and weak. While scientists have concluded that the wine can probably still be consumed without harming the drinker, they warned that it would probably be extremely unpleasant to the taste. As the lower third of the bottle is clear and the upper 2/3 are cloudy, something in the mix appears to have separated over time. We might be a little closer to solving this next archaeological mystery than we are to getting a positive identification on that handbag. For many years now, archaeologists working in Northern Hemisphere locations have wondered why rounded stones, most of which had been carved deliberately, were deposited in and around the settlements of so many ancient communities. Most of the stones come from places where early humanoids gathered, such as Kizim Cave in Israel, which was occupied by Paleolithic humans more than 200,000 years ago. Recent studies have shown traces of animal fat and bone residue, which has led scientists to conclude that the stones were primitive cooking utensils. Our ancient ancestors would use the rocks to smash animal bones open and extract bone marrow from them for consumption. The shape of the rocks helped to break the bones cleanly and efficiently without causing excessive damage to the tasty marrow inside them. We're not sure that we'd recommend anyone try this out in their kitchen at home, but about 250,000 years ago, this must have been the height of sophistication. The ritual of burying deceased rulers in grand tombs with elaborate face masks is most closely associated with the ancient Egyptians, but it isn't uniquely Egyptian. Here's evidence of a similar ritual being carried out in Guatemala during the 4th century. Found in the city of Huaca, a place of great importance to the Mayans, the previously undisturbed tomb dates back to around the year 350. It was immediately apparent that the tomb belonged to someone who held a lot of wealth and power, but the presence of the painted jade mask clearly identifies the occupant as a king. In the traditions of the ancient Mayans, kings were also living gods and were treated as such even in death. Unfortunately, there isn't enough information inside the tomb to positively identify the monarch, but it's possible that he was King Tichen, who ruled during the early 4th century and was a significant figure in the wider region as well as his home country. Both the mask and the remains of the king were painted a bright shade of red for reasons that modern archaeologists are yet to determine. When a battle, a conflict, or war comes to an end, the occasion is usually marked by the signing of a peace treaty. The Kadesh Treaty, written and signed in the year 1269 BCE, is the oldest such document in the world. This artifact goes by many alternative names, including the Silver Treaty and the Eternal Treaty. But to describe it properly, we should call it the Egyptian-Hittite Peace Treaty. Once these tablets were cast, the conflict between Ramses II of Egypt and Hattusilus of Hittite was over. The treaty is made up of 2 separate tablets, both of which were found in Turkey in 1906 in Bagaskoy Bayukil, the city that was once the Hittite capital in ancient times. Aside from being the world's oldest recorded peace treaty, it's also the only surviving Near Eastern treaty of any kind for which we still have each side's copy. Despite having had over a century to study the treaty, there's still disagreement between experts over the matter of whether it's a treaty ending a war or a treaty agreeing to a formal alliance, and which of the 2 sides came to the other to sue for peace. If we don't know now, we may never know at all. To the Inca people, Lake Titicaca was the cradle of life. Their legends said that their civilization began below the lake when the children of the sun rose up from the waters. Spanish invaders knew that the lake was special too. They spoke of a lost city of Inca gold being underwater there, but they couldn't access it. The great Jacques Cousteau came to explore the lake in the 1950s, but found only pottery. A National Geographic expedition in 1988 came back almost empty-handed too. Finally, in the year 2000, a lost city and its buried treasure were found in a submerged area not far from the Bolivian town of Copacabana. And it turns out that the Inca might have had a point about it being the birthplace of their civilization. The ruins found at the bottom of the lake are around 1,500 years old and predate the Inca comfortably. The most intriguing of all the discoveries isn't the gold or the treasure, but the enormous temple dedicated to an unknown god. Nobody knows who built this. The Tiahuanaco or Tiwanaku people are both candidates, but by appearance, it looks to be far beyond their capabilities. In April 2020, a patch of ice in Norway began to melt for the first time in centuries. And as it did so, It revealed ancient treasures that have been hiding below the ice for all this time. Among them is a set of snowshoes for a horse and what can only be described as a Bronze Age ski. As this discovery is so recent, experts aren't yet sure exactly what they found, but they think it might be a Viking-era mountain pass that was used by traders many centuries ago. The pass runs through Len Breen, which is a particularly mountainous region of Norway. As the ice continues to retreat, archaeologists are finding more and more well-preserved artifacts, including leather shoes and arrows, in such good condition that their feathers are still attached to them. The bulk of the finds are from roughly 1,000 years ago. Although there's some evidence of the path being used during the 1st century and remaining in use until the time of the Black Death in the 14th, there may be more remarkable discoveries to be found in the retreating ice in the near future. Of all the places we expected to learn more about ancient Viking runes, a comb would have to count as being among the least likely. Combs were in common use during the Viking era 1,200 years ago, and hundreds of them have been found buried all over the territory that once belonged to the warrior race. There's something special about the comb that was found in the ancient Danish market town of Ribe in December 2017, though. It has the word comb written on it in runes. On the other side, it says to comb. This is one of the earliest examples of the runic alphabet in a practical context. The new system had only just replaced Futhark, and historians have long wondered how long it took for the general population to adapt to the new alphabet. Why someone would write the word comb on an object that was so obviously a comb is a matter of some conjecture. But then again, people have salt and pepper written on their salt and pepper shakers today. It's likely that the person who made the inscription was teaching themselves to write and used household objects to practice on. In April 1784, a Japanese farmer dug into the ground to repair an irrigation ditch on Shikar Island. Almost immediately, he found a series of heavy stones that had been arranged like a box. He didn't know what he was looking at, but he knew it merited further investigation. After calling for help, he lifted the stones away and found the artifact now known as the King of Nasal. The origin of the seal is shrouded in mystery, but it's thought that the golden object was made in ancient China and bestowed upon a Japanese envoy in Emperor Guangwu of Han in the year 57. The name comes from 5 Chinese symbols etched into the seal, identifying it as the seal of the King of Na in the state of Hua, which was the name used for Japan back when it was a vassal state of the Han dynasty. The envoy must have made quite an impression on the emperor. The seal is made of solid gold that's 95% pure. A precious item like this wouldn't just be handed out to anyone who met the emperor. Moon rock on Earth. That's because astronauts have been to the moon and brought it back for scientists to study. How could rock from Earth end up on the moon, though? That's a question currently being pondered by scientists after one of the rocks brought back by the crew of Apollo 14 in 1971 was re-examined in late 2018 and found to contain quartz. The rock, officially known as sample 14,321, but better known as Big Bertha, contains far more quartz than one would expect to find on the moon's surface, which is almost devoid of the material. Along with the quartz, the zircon inside the rock matches rock from Earth, but not rock from other moon samples. This points to the idea of the rock being formed in an oxidizing environment and rules the moon out. Their current best guess is that the rock was dislodged by an asteroid colliding with the Earth several billion years ago, a time when the moon was around 3 times closer to our planet than it is now. It's an intriguing idea, but they need more evidence to support that hypothesis. You've probably never wondered who created the world's first handmade string, but you should, because it's an interesting tale. It might have been made by hands, but they weren't human hands. Researchers working inside a cave in France in early 2020 have found a 1/4-inch long fragment of twisted fibers, and they've been able to prove that it's between 40 and 50,000 years old. That strongly indicates that it was Neanderthals rather than humans who made it. And therefore Neanderthals might have been making cords of string long before human beings mastered the art. We don't have any evidence of human-made string that goes back any further than a 19,000-year-old fragment found in Israel several years ago. This now becomes one of several Neanderthal discoveries made recently, including shell beads, works of art, and birch bark tar that imply that the hominids were significantly more intelligent than we've given them credit for in the past. If they could make string, it's not out of the question to believe that they might have been capable of building boats. People tend to think of fast food as a plague of the modern age, one in which people find it cheaper and easier to get a McDonald's or a KFC than cook healthy food for themselves at home. In reality, there's nothing new about fast food. It's a concept that's existed since at least 2,000 years ago in the famous buried city of Pompeii. Archaeological work at the site of Pompeii never stops. And in early 2019, a team uncovered something called a thermopolium counter, covered in well-preserved ancient frescoes and dating back to the time of the volcano in the year 79. If you translate the name into English, it becomes the place where hot items are sold. Whoever owned or worked at this thermopolium would pre-prepare meals at home, bring them to the counter to heat them up, and sell them to passers-by cheaply. In other words, they sold ready meals, made ancient Roman style. There were more than 100 such facilities in Pompeii, and they kept the city's poorer residents fed with popular favorites like baked cheese and spiced wine, the Big Mac and Coca-Cola of their time. Iraq is a great place to go looking for ancient history. It was once part of Mesopotamia, which was an advanced and influential region of the ancient world. As with most ancient territories, it had its own unique customs and beliefs, and we are yet to fully understand some of them. That's certainly the case with this recently discovered ancient plaza, which appears to have been used to sacrifice animals to a Mesopotamian war god some 5,000 years ago. The god in question was Ninhursag, and hundreds of people would gather at this site to slaughter animals to appease him ahead of times of conflict. They might also have been asking for a better climate, because aside from being a god of war, Ninhursag was also the god of both weather and hunting. Judging by the number of bowls and cups that have been recovered from the site so far, it appears that a large feast followed each sacrificial gathering. What the experts are struggling with is the discovery of a large bronze duck-shaped object right in the middle of the site. They think that it might be a dedication to Nanshi, a water goddess, but seems out of place here. We have a modern construction project to thank for this next discovery. A new dam is being built close to the ancient site of Zugma in Turkey, and so soon the whole area will be flooded. That fact focused the minds of archaeologists who scrambled to the site to uncover as much as they could before the water pours in. They weren't sure what they'd come across, but it's doubtful that they imagined they'd see these beautiful, perfectly preserved 2,200-year-old mosaics. They were found inside buildings dating back to a time when the city was known as Seleucia before it was conquered by the Romans and renamed in 64 BCE. The conditions in the area have preserved the artwork so well that all of the original vivid colors still sparkle. Owning mosaics like these, which tell traditional ancient Greek mythological tales, would have been considered the height of class and sophistication in the era. If you wanted to impress your friends, you'd order a mosaic tribute to the three muses. And it's a tribute that stood the test of time. Earlier on, we suggested that it might be time to accept that Neanderthal people were more advanced than we like to admit they were. We might also have to say the same about Paleolithic people. Just look at the quality of these bison sculptures, which had been hiding in the dark of a cave in France for more than 14,000 years before the discovery in February 2020. Both a bull and a cow bison are represented at the site, which is in the Dortiber cave of Arige. Each of the 2-foot-tall sculptures has been molded by clay taken directly from the cave walls, but came from a time long before humans learned how to fire clay to make statues. Even after such a long time, the hand and fingerprints of the artists are still present on the statues. The jaws, eyes, and finer points of the facial details appear to have been carved using the artist's fingernail. As there would be no reason to create these sculptures other than a love of art, it's probably time to start believing that the people of the Paleolithic era were, to an extent, cultured and civilized. As enormous as woolly mammoths were, we have evidence that some of our bravest ancestors used to hunt and eat them. Now, we also have evidence that they might have used their bones to make houses, thanks to the discovery of a huge mammoth bone structure in Russia. At over 40 feet wide, it's possible that it was used for a larger purpose than just being a single home. But as a feat of bone-based engineering, it's spectacular if a little grim, as the site is a very recent discovery. Initial research is still ongoing, but it's currently believed that it was built more than 25,000 years ago by human hands. It's generally thought that hunter-gatherers moved from place to place rather than staying in the same spot for months or years on end. But they might sometimes have stayed a little longer if there was a good source of food in their immediate area. Perhaps this imposing mammoth bone cavern was made to house several of them at the same time. If that's the case, the occupants must have enjoyed a feast. The bones of over 60 full-size mammoths have been found at the site. Structures made of mammoth bone have been found before across the east of Europe, but never one of this size or significance. Right at the start of 2020, a picture of petrified wood in Arizona, USA went viral across the internet. The wood had been waiting for a very long time for the world's attention. It's close to 225 million years old. The wood isn't just petrified, it's been through another chemical process. It's been nicknamed opal because it was initially thought to have been opalized, but it would be more accurate to classify it as agate, which is a type of quartz. Opal and agate are both minerals with a silica base, but agate has a crystalline structure that's clearly visible in the popular photographs. You wouldn't get that from opalization. If you were ever inclined to go looking for it, you'd find it in the Crystal Forest area of the Petrified Forest National Park in the state. It's thought that the wood absorbed silica from volcanic ash more than 200 million years ago, which has slowly crystallized over the course of the time that followed. If you dug into the ground beneath your basement and found a stash of beer perfectly preserved inside unopened bottles, you might be tempted to drink it, but you'd be advised not to sample the beer cache that was found at the site of the old Scarborough Castle Inn in Leeds, England in March 2020. The beer was bottled and stored in 19th century, and so it would have gone off many years ago, and even if it hadn't, it would still be poisonous. Mystifyingly, as well as being around 3% alcohol by volume, the beer is also 0.15% lead. Over 300 bottles were found at the site, all brewed by a long-forgotten company called J. Richardson. It's doubtful that a brewery would want to deliberately poison its customers, but the lead percentage of these beers is high enough to cause internal organs to fail. Experts are baffled as to how the lead could have gotten into the mixture. The bottles were undisturbed, so they weren't added at a later date. One possible explanation is that the water used during the brewing process came from lead pipes, a practice that was outlawed in the early 1900s. Many of us associate olive oil with Italy and Italian cooking, and that's not without good reasons. The practice of using olive oil has gone on in the countries, and thanks to a discovery made in June 2018, we now know that it started 700 years earlier than we previously believed. That's because traces of the substance have been identified inside a Bronze Age ceramic jar in Sicily that was made 4,000 years ago. The archaeologists who found the jar noted that it had an unusual shape compared to other jars of the era, and so they sent it for further scientific study. That's when linoleic and oleic acid were both confirmed to be present, the telltale signs of olive oil. We know that the Italians picked up the habit of using olive oil from the ancient Greeks, but it now seems that the habit was picked up 7 centuries before we thought the first such trade happened. While it's natural to assume that the olive oil in this jar was used for a cookery, we can't be certain. Olive oil was used for a variety of other purposes in ancient times, including medicine and fuel for burning incense. Dinosaurs were the largest creatures ever to walk across the face of the earth. We all know that, and we've known that for years. Archaeologists finding dinosaur bones is nothing new, but when they find one that's larger than anything they've ever seen before, it's worth writing home about. That's what happened when the thigh bone of a previously unknown species of titanosaur was dug up in Argentina in 2014. By extrapolating data from the thigh bone alone, scientists have concluded that it must have been at least 130 feet long and 60 feet tall. Factor in all of its skin and organs, and would have weighed over 70 tons. To put it another way, it would have been like a large building walking around on gigantic legs. The fossilized thighs are embedded in rock that's around 100 million years old, meaning that this sauropod would have belonged to Earth's Cretaceous period. Now we found a small piece of it. The race is on to find more remains, so we can begin to piece a complete skeleton of the humongous creature together. Here's a statement that might be controversial. The Chinese might have discovered the Americas 3,300 years ago, long before Christopher Columbus undertook his epic voyage. The finding hasn't been substantiated or confirmed just yet, but researcher and expert John Ruskamp is absolutely positive that he's identified pictograms from China's ancient Shang dynasty etched into rocks in California, New Mexico, and Arizona. He sees them as proof that the Chinese were exploring the continent long before Europeans arrived. A large boulder in Albuquerque, New Mexico, might be especially significant. It appears to contain glyphs that tell the tale of a Chinese man honoring his ruler by sacrificing a dog to his honor. We know that dog sacrifices were common in China 2,000 years ago as a mark of respect. Another set of symbols found by the shore of California's Little Lake describes a boat arriving on the water. The marks are weathered enough to suggest that they've been there for a very long time, but the difficulties involved in accurately dating markings on rock mean that it may never be possible to prove John's astounding claims. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon.